It's Edwin Canistraci, and I'm a hardcore Motorhead fan, and I'm here to kind of give you a public service. I'm going to help casual Motorhead fans and people that maybe just got like Ace of Spades or a Greatest Hits compilation, and they're thinking, I really like that, but I'd like to take it to, take it to the next level and see what else Lemmy has to offer. Lemmy has a lot to offer. He has 22 albums, 22 official studio albums, so this is no easy task. So I'm going to give you a quick review of each album, and hopefully this will help you work your way through the Motorhead catalog. And I'm also going to make things a little hard for myself. Not only am I drinking, I'm going to count. On Parole is the first album, but it really wasn't the first album. It was kind of a misstep, a misfire. It was with the original lineup, and this original lineup didn't really take, and the record label shelved the album. And this was like shortly after Lemmy left Hawkwind, which also you should check out the Hawkwind albums with Lemmy, but can't throw that into it, would be just too much. And On Parole is really just for people that are hardcore Motorhead fans. Like after they already got the official 22 albums and a couple live albums and B-sides, and you're still hungry for more, and you'd like to just hear other alternative versions of the songs from the first album, which already had alternative versions, because a lot of the, at least three, I think, of the songs were already Hawkwind songs that Lemmy wrote. And so really I can't recommend it unless you already listened to all the other albums and you just want more. It's got more historical significance than anything else. It's definitely, you can hear the making of Motorhead here, but it's not really as hard and heavy and as defined as they would be on their proper debut, which is the 1978 album, simply titled Motorhead. This is the one that started it all. Actually, it's I'm looking right here. It's 77, not 78. My apologies. I'm going to cheat sometimes, look at the Wikipedia since I'm doing this without any edits and cuts, and I don't want to give you guys bullshit information. So 77, first album, Motorhead. Now, essentially, they re-recorded On Parole with a new lineup. Now, this lineup would be considered the classic Motorhead lineup. Along with Lemmy, you have Phil the Filthy Animal Taylor, one of the greatest drummers ever, arguably the guy who created the double bass drum that led to inspiring many thrash drummers. And also, you have Fast Eddie Clarke, the guitarist. And so these three guys, a trio, they came out of this gate, and this was the lineup. It's solidified, and Lemmy's like, these are the guys. They put out this album, and man, right out of the gate, you hear Lemmy's fuzzy, dirty, heavy bass line in the opening title track, and the name of the band, Motorhead. And it's just grabs you immediately. They have their sound, their Motorhead. It's this perfect mix of punk rock and heavy metal. It's bluesy, it's heavy as hell. I'm going to try not to drop the F-bomb since this is YouTube. And, it just keeps on going. And my favorite track is Keep Us on the Road, which is this epic, slow, kind of slow for Motorhead, but still heavy, and Lemmy has this awesome bass solo. But for the most part, what Motorhead's introducing here is speed, and it's an amazing album. I think one of their best. Just raw, has that energy. Bam! It's like the beginning of the new wave of British heavy metal. It's right there in Motorhead. Then they take it to the next level, and they create their best album. This one, Overkill. That's right, Overkill is a masterpiece, and pretty much I'd say this is their best album. Now, you might say, well, okay, they peaked on their second album, so screw them. Why am I going to keep listening to them for like 20 more albums? Because, hey, once you hit the beautiful perfection of Overkill, why wouldn't you want to just keep doing variations of that beautiful perfection? And, you don't want to always listen to the same album again and again, but you might want to listen to different variations, different colors and nuances, different plays off of the same formula. It's more or less what AC/DC did over the years too, once they solidified their sound. But there are some curveballs here and there. Motorhead has changed a little bit over the years, but Overkill is definitely where they get their formula down, and it's an amazing album. Every song on this is a classic. It's you got the title track, you got Metropolis, you got a Damaged Case. Oh man, this album, it's the epitome of rock and roll. It's where thrash, heavy metal, rock and roll, hard rock, it's all rolled into one. A lot of people feel the title track is the beginning of thrash. I mean, yeah, you can go back to Symptom of the Universe or something like that, but Overkill's where it creates the sound of early '80s heavy metal, and it's just a masterpiece. And I don't want to go on and on about this album because we got 20 more to go. So then they do Bomber. Now Bomber, it's a good album. I'm not gonna say it's not. It's a bit of a drop off after Overkill. Now Overkill's one of the greatest albums of all time, so that's not really such a bad thing. It's all right. It's a little slower. It's a little bluesier. Still has great songs like the title track and Dead Man Tell No Tales and Stone Deaf Forever. It's a really good album. It's just solid, dirty rock and roll. I don't think it's one of their best albums, but if you like that period, if you like late '70s on the cusp of the '80s, Motorhead and that sound, and why wouldn't you? Because it's awesome. Then Bomber's got that sound. Then we enter the '80s, 1980, another classic 1980 metal album. This is the one that most likely, if you're interested in Motorhead, you're probably going to get first, which is Ace of Spades, because Ace of Spades is the only song people seem to know from Motorhead. And it is a great song, but there's a lot more Motorhead Town than just Ace of Spades. I mean, Ace of Spades is great, I love it, but there's other songs. And just on this album alone, there's Love You Like a Reptile, the Chase is Better Than the Catch. Oh man, such a great album. Definitely, if Bomber kind of dipped a little bit after Overkill, they pick it right back up again if Ace of Spades. It's tight, it's mean, it's fast, perhaps a little slicker, but still raw and heavy. And it's a masterpiece in the early '80s. Probably not my favorite Motorhead album, but it's I guess it's like in the top 5. It's definitely essential. Then we get to Iron Fist. Iron Fist was kind of considered a letdown by some people when it first came out as a kind of inferior Ace of Spades clone. It is more or less just Ace of Spades Part 2. But hey, Ace of Spades is great, so why wouldn't you want just a kind of variation of that? It's just a sequel. It's maybe a little slicker. It's heavy. It's got some great songs. I Don't Need Religion and America and Loser. It's an amazing record. I love it. It's just hard heavy. It's got that early '80s sound. I wouldn't say it's one of the first ones you should get, but if you do like the early '80s Motorhead sound, hey, it's consistent. You'll like this. Then we get to perhaps my second favorite Motorhead album, and this is where they do take a slight U-turn, which is Another Perfect Day. Another Perfect Day, they lost Eddie Clarke, and in place of him, they replaced him with Brian Robbo, I think that's how you say his name, Robertson, who was originally in Thin Lizzy. And if you know, Thin Lizzy has a very melodic kind of guitar sound, and he brings a kind of cleaner, more melodic guitar sound, which I think is a beautiful contrast and complement to the rawness of the rhythm section of Lemmy and Filthy. And so you'll have this like the typical Motorhead like rhythm and grit underneath it, but then you'll have these sheets of sounds that Robbo does. It's like kind of almost like Van Halen-esque, but over Motorhead, and creates all these really nice melodies, and just shows you what a great songwriter. It helps enhance Lemmy's melodic gifts, because I think underneath all the heaviness and sound, one of the great things that makes Motorhead such a solid rock and roll group is that Lemmy could write a tune. And this is one of their most tuneful albums. It's one of their best productions, if not their best. It sounds crisp and great and clear, but yet not at the expense of the heaviness or rawness. I definitely recommend this one. Another Perfect Day is a great example of how Lemmy could do a little twist on the formula while not selling out, but it's an amazing album. Title track's epic. You got Shine, Dancing on Your Grave, just love this album. Then Motorhead, no one liked Robbo. He was a weird guy. He wore sweatpants, and he didn't want to play any of the old songs, and I don't know. He was Irish. No one liked him. So, nothing against the Irish. I'm a quarter Irish myself. But so they gave him the boot, and Lemmy had to kind of rebuild the band, and they actually have some new studio tracks at this time period on a compilation, No Remorse, which has one of their most famous songs, "Killed by Death," which is great. And the only way you can get that in these tracks with this new lineup is on the No Remorse compilation, or you could just get them from iTunes. Whatever, no harm, no foul. And this new lineup, I forget the drummer's name. It doesn't matter because he's not in there too long, so I'm not going to even look it up. But what you have is you have Wurzel and on guitar, plus another guitarist who's going to be in the band quite for a long time, until the end actually, is Phil Campbell. And so you got two guitarists now. So the lineup is it's a four-piece band now. So you got two guitars and Lemmy's bass. And this results in Orgasmatron. 1986 Orgasmatron, another one of their best albums, and another example of Lemmy, how he could kind of stay the same but change at the same time. If you love Motorhead, you'll still love this album, but it is another variation. It kind of, with the two guitars, it creates this kind of wall of sound. If anything, it's even heavier than before. It's sonically very powerful. I know a lot of people complained the original mix or master was really muddy sounding, and Lemmy was disappointed in it. But if you got the remasters, it's not really a problem. It sounds great. I mean, I think the remaster sounds amazing, and this just has a thick, heavy, very powerful sound. A lot of great tracks. I highly recommend Orgasmatron, and it's called Orgasmatron. Built for Speed and Dr. Rock and The Claw. Just a great, dirty, mean, gonna kick your butt rock and roll record. Then we got, speaking of rock and roll, the next album, which is called Rock and Roll. This one, I guess you could say, as the title suggests, Lemmy kind of simplifies it. It's still a four-piece. Filthy's back, by the way. Yeah, so that drummer, whose name I don't know, he's out. And Filthy's back in, which is great because we love Filthy, R.I.P. And Filthy's in there, and it's more of a stripped back, kind of back, almost, I guess, like Iron Fist style Motorhead album. It's good. When I first heard it, I thought it was like a drop-off after Orgasmatron, and maybe it is to a degree, but it's really grown on me a lot. I love this album. It's just tuneful and fun. It's kind of a party record. A lot of Motorhead albums, they might have some fun songs, but they have darker songs and heavier songs and deeper songs. For the most part, Rock and Roll is just a fun, like, party album. Eat the Rich is a big one from it. Not actually one of my favorites. My favorite is a song called Black Heart. Yeah, Black Heart, that's right. Has this great backing chorus. Black Heart, Black Heart. Oh, I love it. Anyway, Black Heart's cool. But anyway, so Rock and Roll, maybe not one of the first Motorhead albums you need to get, but still a very, very good album. Then we get to the very first Motorhead I ever bought, the album that got me into Motorhead, which is 1916. 1916, once again, Motorhead's sticking to their basic formula. Wow, really, if anything, this is probably the one that's the most diverse. This shows a lot of different sides. It's amazing album, amazing production. Originally before the latest import remaster, I thought the bass was mixed down a little low, so it didn't quite have that same Motorhead heaviness, but in the remaster, that's fixed. It's driven me to drink, though. Anyway, where were we? 1916. Yeah, one of my favorite albums. Not only for sentimental reasons, because it's the album that got me into Motorhead, but it shows the range of Lemmy. It shows that there's a lot more to Lemmy than just Ace of Spades. It has such classic songs. One which to me should be just as memorable as Ace of Spades is "I'm So Bad, Baby, I Don't Care." I mean, it has my favorite opening line ever in a Motorhead song, which is "I make love to mountain lions." Now, doesn't that just say it all? Lemmy's it's like Muddy Waters machismo, but cranked to 11 and fast and hard and dirty. And at the same time, we have other sides on this album. There's even like a slow, there's a ballad. He does like a dark psychedelic song that's kind of like the stuff in Hawkwind. Nightmare, the Dreamtime, and Going to Brazil, which is good old fun rock and roll song about Nazis. There's Angel City, which has horns on it, even horns. Normally, that would be a real break it moment. You think imagine if AC/DC had horns, it'd be ruined. Somehow Motorhead manages to do it. Angel City, yeah, I mean, I'm not saying it's the first song I'd point you to, but it doesn't it's not a blemish on their legacy. And it's the Sunset Strip album. That's how I feel about 1916. Lemmy had moved to LA, and it's kind of like his celebration of LA, both the fun side and the dark, seedy side. Plus, it also ends with the title track, which is a song that sounds like something Roger Waters would write. It's this really dark, haunting, beautiful song about soldiers in WW1 1916. Very, very haunting song, and again shows the range of Lemmy as a songwriter. Then we have the next album, which, well, this is the thing. I don't think Motorhead recorded any bad albums, but one album has to be the worst, right? I mean, one album has to be the least awesome, and I guess that would be March or Die. Now, March or Die attempts to kind of do the same thing that they did in 1916, but the results aren't as good. Like now, it almost sounds borderline sellout. It's not. It doesn't quite. It's still, it's still Motorhead, but this is as close to Motorhead selling out and trying to sound like, I wouldn't even see a hair metal band. It just, if anything, it sounds like an out like maybe a popular metal band from the like Motley Crue or something from like the mid '80s. So it's like if this was released in 1985, March or Die probably would have been a sellout album. But since he released it during the beginning of grunge in '92, it just sounds like kind of like a wrong turn. But there's still some good songs. He does a really good version of Cat Scratch Fever, actually. And he has a nice ballad with Ozzy Osbourne on it, too, which I think is one of the standout tracks. But obviously, Lemmy felt like this was a wrong turn as well. And so he reboots with the next album. And man, it's one of their best, Bastards. Now, unfortunately, this is I think this album might even be out of print, but I'm sure you can find a copy in the Amazon Marketplace or just get it from iTunes. But Bastards is one of their best albums. It's a mission statement that kind of defines the rest of Motorhead's career, more or less, where it's saying, okay, I experimented, we tried different things. Now I'm going to get back to what we do best, which is heavy as hell, hard rock and roll, heavy metal rock and roll music. And Bastards is great. It just comes out of the gate, and one of the standout tracks, a track called Liar I love, and Devils, and it's one of their most tuneful albums while still one of their heaviest albums, and it's a total comeback. They're totally back in the game again, and even if like only diehard fans are listening at this point, it's like, Lemmy doesn't care. It's like, okay, that's it. We're not going to try to cross over. We crossed if 1916 didn't do it, and God knows March or Die is not going to do it. We might as well just cater, make our fans happy. Make the cretins that love Motorhead down to their bones happy, and that's what Bastards does. That's why I think it's called Bastards. It's like, it's to you bastards, you Motorhead loving bastards. They also, by the way, they got a new drummer now because Filthy drinking too much. It's Mickey D. Mickey D, who is now going to be the drummer for the rest of the career. Mickey D is one of the greatest drummers ever. This guy, man, I saw him live. Best drummer I ever heard live. Mickey D is amazing, and this is beginning to be like what I consider the second great Motorhead lineup. And this leads also to another one of their best albums, Sacrifice. Oh man, Sacrifice. You thought Bastards was good and heavy? Sacrifice is even heavier. It's even darker. It's grittier. Oh, the title track alone. Also probably my favorite Motorhead video. You should watch it. It's got a lot of crazy, stuff going on. I love this album. Over Your Shoulder, Baby, and it's just, it's heavy as hell, and it's real like stripped down, like really stripped to the. It's probably their most minimalistic and primal record. I know it's Lemmy's favorite Motorhead album. That's what he said anyway. He used to always say Sacrifice was his favorite, and it's one of my favorite. It's a standout in their catalog, one of their best albums, just as good as any of their classic albums in the '80s. Sacrifice, and also Wurzel, if I'm saying that right. Wurzel, this is the last album he appears on. As it is, he's kind of playing on it a little less than he had on the previous albums. And I think it was on this tour that he stopped playing with him. And Motorhead essentially now becomes a trio again. They're back to like how they originally were. And that trio is the second great lineup, and the band that is Motorhead until Lemmy's tragic passing. It's Lemmy as always, and it's Mickey D on drums, and it's Phil Campbell on guitar. Now both lead and rhythm, and they're now solidified as a trio. This is the second great band, and they officially introduced this band. This is probably why it's the only Motorhead cover, I think, without Snaggletooth that has actually the band member. Well, no, Ace of Spades. I think it's this and Ace of Spades are the only two that don't have Snaggletooth. Overnight Sensation from '96. Overnight Sensation, another great record, and they're in a good place here. The mid '90s, I think, is probably their best period after the early '80s or late '70s. This is another peak era for Motorhead. Overnight Sensation might not be quite as awesome as Bastards and Sacrifice, but it's still pretty freaking awesome. Very tuneful too. It's pretty heavy, but throws in a few like the last song, "Open Your Heart," which is almost like kind of like a Guns N' Roses type Sunset Strip fun party song. The title track's great. Crazy, like a Fox. It's just a great, consistent Motorhead album, and it's showing how consistent. 3 great albums in a row. Then, as things happen, gotta cut them some slack. They gotta dip again. Snakebite Love is probably one of their weaker albums. Now, I think it's gotten. I listened to it a few times recently, and I think it's a little bit better than I originally thought, but it's still definitely not one of their best. If you really love Motorhead, you might as well get them all. But this is definitely not one of the first 10 or 15 albums to get. So there's a couple good tracks, but all in all, I can't even put my finger on it. There's something a little weird about this album. I don't know if it's a production or what, but it just doesn't have that same focus or quality that the other Motorhead albums have. But it's not bad. Like I said, there's nothing really bad about it. It's just something kind of inexpressibly not awesome. But it's all right. Love for Sale's a catchy enough song. I feel like it would have sounded better if it was on 1916. Anyway, then Lemmy gets back on the Iron Horse again, and this is the first album of the millennial. We Are Motorhead. I mean, this is what you gotta love about a band. A band has released this many albums. It's been around for now like 3 decades, over 3 decades, and they call this album "We Are Motorhead." It's like just confirmation, further confirmation that Motorhead's just going to keep on going. Just going to keep on going, and this is a great album. Maybe not as great as those albums from the mid '90s, but it's definitely a superior album to Snakebite Love, and it also has my very favorite Motorhead ballad, "One More Time." And oh man, this song's epic. It's a ballad, but it's heavy and it's poignant and it's beautiful, and it just shows that Lemmy could do a ballad and it's not like a wussy song. It's like dark and heavy and meaningful, and it's one of my favorites. Then there's a dip again. Again, you might at this point you might think, okay, well Lemmy's getting older now, so maybe their records will be as good. Don't worry, they get good again. But Hammered, which is what, from 2002. Hammered is probably the second worst album in my opinion. Like, it battles March or Die. Again, like I said, I don't think any Motorhead albums are bad. It's just definitely not one of the first ones to get. I actually think it's a little odd because the second side is a lot stronger than the first side. Normally, especially Motorhead albums, they come out of the gate very strong, but Hammered comes out of the gate really weak, I think, and they do some kind of processing on Lemmy's voice on the first song, which I don't like, a little nu metal-ish. I mean, it's not too nu metal-ish, but a little too much for my taste in terms of how they produced his voice. But there's some good tracks, like in the middle. There's Shut Your Mouth, which kind of reminds me of Sin City, and this what's another song that's decent from this album? I mean, like I probably listened to this one like 3 or 4 times. Red Raw, yeah, Red Raw is a good song. But for the most part, I'd say avoid Hammered until you get at least 20 other Motorhead albums. Then, right when you were about to count out Motorhead, they release another one of their greatest albums, and I am talking about 2004's Inferno. Oh my God, Lemmy's like now in his 60s, but he still shows with Inferno that he's not going, he's not going easily into the night. Inferno is one of their heaviest. Up there, it's like Sacrifice. It's really heavy. It's really dark. The songwriting's totally top notch again. Terminal Show, Lemmy being so singing about mortality and killers and In the Name of Tragedy. There's just so many greats. In the Year of the Wolf. It's just it's tuneful, it's consistent, the production's great, the bands sound great, and they don't sound like a young band. I mean, an old band. They sound like a young band. If you like listen to this, Inferno sounds like it could have came out in the mid '80s. It's but yet still relevant in its time. Like Motorhead's a timeless band. But Inferno is one of their greatest albums, definitely in their top 10, just as great as any of the other from the mid 90s or the 80s. And it just shows that, and from this point on, now I don't think they ever record an album again as great as Inferno, but they never record an album as lackluster as Hammered or Snakebite Love either. They stay very consistent now up until the end. The next album, sorry about that. Oh, Kiss of Death, yeah. Kiss of Death was an album at first I was a little underwhelmed by. I didn't think it was bad, but I thought it was like, it was a little like, it's like what Iron Fist is to Ace of Spades. Kiss of Death is essentially Inferno Part 2, for better or worse. And, I'm leaning towards better now. I mean, Inferno's so great, why wouldn't we want another album that sounds kind of like it? Be My Baby's a great standout track. God Was Never on Your Side. It's a really, really good album. Dark, heavy, consistent, shows that the band's going to keep on going in this Inferno direction, at least for one more album. And it's a really good album. It's grown a lot on me, kind of like Rock and Roll. It's an album that's grown a lot over the years. Then they record Motorizer. Motorizer's not as good as the last two albums, but still consistent, still solid. This, I'd say, it's probably not as dark and heavy as the last two albums. It gets a little more back to the early old school Motorhead sound, where they had a little more of a punk rock influence and not as heavy metal. I guess if you want to say that that's how it's a little different, but more or less it sounds like Motorhead. It's a good, fun rock and roll record. There's not really a lot of standouts on it though. It's just like, if you like Motorhead, you'll like this. I wouldn't recommend it as one of the first ones to get or one of the first 10 you get, but if you love Motorhead, you'll like it. Then is The World Is Yours, which is kind of Motorizer Part 2. It's kind of similar. I think it's maybe a little bit better. There's a standout track, a song called Outlaw, which I really love on this album, which is really heavy. Great thing is, like, Lemmy, by this point, it's 2010. Lemmy's, really, really getting up there in his age, and he still sounds heavy. The band still sounds the same. They still have that same energy. Even if this isn't one of their best albums, it's still consistent, and it's just amazing that they can keep up with this. And then they actually do one better with the next one, Aftershock. Aftershock, not quite as great as Inferno or even Kiss of Death, in my opinion, but better than the two before it. I think it kind of takes it again to another level. Great production. Sounds really heavy, but yet a little more produced than some of their previous albums. It's kind of like an early 80s kind of Motorhead sound, but still relevant, timeless, as they always are. Anyway, Dust and Glass. Oh, man, I love that song. Lost Woman Blues is also another good song. And then we get, sadly, to the last album, which is last year's Bad Magic. Now, Bad Magic is another great Motorhead album, very consistent. If anything, I like it maybe a little bit better than Aftershock. It's a little rawer, it's a little heavier, it's a little darker. This might be the only Motorhead album, I'd say, when you could kind of discernibly hear Lemmy's strain in his voice. Like, now he is starting to sound like a man who's, almost 70. But for God's sake, I mean, the man was literally at death's door. So if he can't sound a little tired, then got to cut him slack. But he still sounds hard. He sounds like an old battered warrior at death's door. That's what he sounds like. And so it's still raw. It's still like an old blues man, an old ragged soldier blues man. That's what he sounds like. And the music still is heavy and consistent and fast as Motorhead always is. It's a great album. Maybe not as great as Inferno, but I do think it's my favorite post-Inferno is Bad Magic, and there's a lot of great tracks on it, and again, always showed that Lemmy could write a great tune up until the end. The Victory or Die, Thunder, Light and Lightning, Electricity, Teach Them How to Bleed, I really love that one. When the Sky Comes Looking for You. It's it's it also it ends with a very good cover of the Stones' "Sympathy for the Devil." So that's it. 22 and plus live albums, and there's compilations like No Remorse. If you get a live album, definitely get No Sleep Till Hammersmith, which I am playing in the background right now. That is the greatest live Motorhead album done during the Ace of Spades tour. But more or less, those are the 22 albums. So there's certain things I said about certain albums that appeal to you. Go to that album. Definitely think for the most part, I would say late 70s into mid 80s is the one peak. Then you got the mid 90s peak, and then you got kind of Inferno and them fairly being consistent up to Bad Magic as like a third peak. And those are like the three periods I would look to first, and then kind of fill in the blanks afterwards. But I love Motorhead. Hopefully, this gets some of you to buy some more Motorhead albums. And I'm going to drink some Jack now. Ah, that's for Lemmy. R.I.P. You're a rock and roll legend. You always will be, even after death. Love you. And rock and roll, people.